Hello, I'm Luca De Giglio, and this is the Web3 in Travel podcast, where you can learn about crypto, blockchain, and how the new internet will change travel. So what follows is an interview with Horst Treiblmaier, a full professor in University of Vienna, specialized in blockchain technologies and also in the travel vertical. It was an introduction from Maxim from Winding Tree, and honestly, I'm recording this after the call. It was really interesting. Quick reminder, we have the conference in Barcelona on the 15th of May 2023. We have great speakers. Check the website, web3intravel.com. It's going to be beautiful, in my opinion. Another thing I remind you a bit frustratingly is that you can sponsor this podcast or you can donate to the podcast by getting an NFT. It's been so far deserted. Only one person bought an NFT as a donation. And we discussed this in the interview too. I think it's mostly a problem of like too many steps, and it's difficult. You need to have money on Arbitrum, etc., etc. So I just remind you that it's gonna make me very happy if I get even a little donation, not for the money itself, but for the sponsor, I think it's efficient. For the sponsor, you get really exposure to a small but very, very well followed podcast. This podcast is followed by people who are, many of them are the high level in the industry. So you're going to reach a very selected audience. So go ahead, make the effort. Or let me know, contact me if you want help. Let's get this thing going. Because if it doesn't go, I'm going to have to make it payable by fiat with a credit card. I don't want to do that. Let's show them we can do this without them. All right, enjoy the interview. Hello, everyone. Today we have a chat with Horst Treiblmaier. He's a full professor for international management at the Modul University in Vienna, which he just told me it started as a tourism university. So, Horst, I will just let you, introduce yourself to our listeners, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be on this podcast, which is so important for the tourism industry. And as you've already said, I'm a full professor at Modul University Vienna. I'm also the head of the School of International Management there. And I will jump right in and tell you how I first heard about blockchain Bitcoin. It must have been around 2010, 2011, sometime very early. And the reason for that I took notice of that because my PhD was about electronic commerce. So I was aware of the work that happened in the field. There was Wai Dai inventing B-money, and David Chaum, who had many of the ideas that went into Bitcoin long ago. And I took notice of that, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. Somebody solved the problem of peer-to-peer payments with Bitcoin. And then I thought, what's in it for me? So if you use PayPal nowadays, how much do you pay? I think you pay about 3% for a commercial transaction. I think it's even free for transactions between private persons. So I thought, oh, it makes payment a little bit cheaper, and that's basically it. Nice achievement, but nothing special. And in a way, I didn't get the big picture. I didn't see all the disruptive potential and all that could be done with the technology. So it took me a couple of years. I didn't follow Bitcoin then. And around 2015, I really digged a little bit deeper. And then I understood what can be done with blockchain technology that's in the background. And I think many people are still in the year 2023 in that stage when you can see all this confusion going on, Bitcoin, blockchain, DLT. There's always the discussion about energy use, and all these things get mixed up. And so in a way, we are still at a stage, or many people are still at a stage where I was in the early days, where they cannot see the full potential of the technology. And I devoted my full time doing research on blockchain in around 2015, 2016. And I started publishing my first papers in different communities, and tourism community being one of them, because of course Modul University Vienna has a strong background in tourism. We have many students in that area, and I was lucky enough to publish a couple of papers in that field. So I got a lot of positive response, and now I'm fully focusing on researching on blockchain in general and blockchain in tourism in specific.
So this is really interesting, because I've never seen, this field, Web3 in travel or crypto in general, from the academia point of view. So I know nothing about this, and it's going to be very interesting to hear, your perspective. It's going to give us another dimension to these technologies. And so beautiful. By the way, thank you to Maxim from Winding Tree, who made the introduction. This has to be said. And yeah, okay, let's go ahead. So academia is following this, with papers and research, etc. Why? I mean, what is the? I mean, sorry to make it very, like, of course, why? There's reasons, but like, would you explain what is the target for you personally to research about that? What is the end game, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in academia, of course, we have teaching in the first place, and teaching is very important because we are teaching the next generation of managers, and especially tourism managers. And when they are going out into the field, we want them to be equipped with the latest technology. And so I see it as our job to keep an eye on the markets and to see what can potentially be done, and to give them a competitive advantage when they're going out in the field. That's the teaching part. And when it comes to research, we are also, from a business perspective, very keen to make some impact for the industry that's already there, and we want to give them some input, so they are saying what we are doing at the university is also useful for them. And I'm now mostly talking about applied research that I'm and many others are doing, which is business related research. And for me, the interesting thing still is that I see some kind of disconnect between the more technical communities and the applied communities, the business communities. And what I mean with that, there is a lot of excellent research going on. And of course, those technicians the computer scientists, cryptographers, they really understand the technology, and they're already way more advanced in their research. They're proposing new and crazy things, talking about sophisticated algorithms and things like that. And then there is the business community, and it's still the case that I see publications coming up, and this also happens a lot in the social media or in newspapers, where I figure out they did not fully understand the technology behind it. And then I very often I still hear statements like blockchain uses too much energy, to give you a classic one. And in the year 2023, so there is some kind of disconnect, and even academia, between the applied communities and the technical communities that are driving the technology. And I see research as important because we as academics need to spread the word. And sometimes I'm also writing publications for the general audience, for practitioners. And I hope that they get inspired, and then they get a feeling of what can be done with the technology, because we need to drive the industry. We need to make sure that the newest technology is understood, and then they can decide for themselves if this is something they want to use or not.
When you say industry, you mean the travel industry or more broad?
My background is in information systems, so my research focus is on blockchain in general, and I'm targeting a couple of communities, which is kind of unusual, but it's because I'm doing blockchain and supply chain management, or I'm doing blockchain and marketing, and blockchain and tourism. So basically, when I'm talking about industry, I mean all kinds of industries, because for some weird reason, blockchain can transform many industries. But I also mean especially the tourism industry, because first of all, I've done some work in that area, and we all know that there's a lot of potential for the tourism industry. And your whole podcast, you had more than 60 episodes yet, gives a lot of ideas for the industry, what they can potentially do. So tourism is a very important industry that can benefit a lot from all these developments that are going on, that just need to be aware of that.
Let me ask you a question, because a few years ago I was in Torino, is the Italian town in the north. There was at a university, and they invited me to speak about crypto and travel. And when I asked the students how many of them had wallets, etc., the numbers are very, very low. What is the situation in the student community now for in Web3 in general?
Yeah, it's still the case that only few students are involved in the space. And for me, that's kind of interesting because in the past, I was doing research, let's say, on website optimization. And over the years, I could see the number of students grow that have experience in that area. And at a certain point in time, everybody knew about these kind of things. But with Web3 and let's say cryptocurrencies, there's always a number of students, even in my class that started last week. I'm teaching a class now. I have about, how many students? Maybe 40 or 50 students, and I say 5 or 10 of them had exposure to cryptocurrencies. And I would have expected in 2017 that in the year 2023, everybody would be familiar with the technology from the younger generation, but it's actually not the case. And most of the students who have had some exposure to cryptocurrencies, they have a wallet, but they're just using it for speculative purposes. They heard about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies. They get a wallet, they download some cryptocurrencies and hope they make money out of that. But there's hardly anyone who sees the big picture and has done more than that, created some NFTs, used them for commercial purposes and things like that. And that's what I want to change in my classes.
Yeah, it's both frustrating and at the same time even more. It confirms the fact that this technology is still very early. I came to the conclusions that wallets are great. Of course, they give you sovereignty on your assets, but they are hard, but especially dangerous. So I stopped pushing people to adopt wallets because they adopt them and then many of them lose whatever they put on top of it. And so we need, as an industry, crypto industry, to do better wallets. And this is actually happening this year. There's a lot of talks. I mean, everybody's talking about account abstraction, etc. So we need to improve before we want to onboard people. But at the same time, and I was in a conference, on a panel in Bari in the south of Italy last week, and there were young people in front in the first row, and looking at them, I said, guys, you have no idea. And that's kind of a message for your students too, if they're going to listen to the podcast. You have no idea of the opportunity you have, because old people who are older are just not going to do these things. They're not going to make the effort. And you are the first generation who's going to have an internet where they can actually own stuff. Because our generation, we are on Facebook, Instagram, Airbnb, Booking. We own nothing. You will actually own stuff. So this is a wealth creation history starting right now. And those kids, young people have an incredible opportunity. I myself, when I was 20, 30, I had the opportunity of jump on the internet and build my own business and travel. So I was lucky with Web 1. That was Web 1. Web 2, the one we live in today, is different. The opportunities are to become, an influencer, a YouTuber, but this is a very risky thing. You are working for an algorithm, right? You don't have control on this. So Web 1 was great for me. Web 2 is great for corporations and people who can actually break that code and become famous, but they're very few. I mean, just a few people become famous and rich on Web 2. You see them, they're very visible. But it's like sports stars, right? How many Ronaldos, how many Messis are there out there? Not many. Web3, we go back to like everybody can be well off, can have a business, can actually live off the internet without working for a corporation. So, and I'm going to end up here for you students. Guys, this is an historical moment. It's not going to happen anymore. Get involved into this stuff because it's going to change your life.
Definitely. And what I can sometimes see that my students, when they're later in the industry, they then fully realize the potential of the technology. And I recently got a couple of invitations. Last year, I was invited to Kosovo by a former student of mine to give a keynote speech. Just 2 weeks ago, I got an invitation from a student of mine who is now working in the real estate industry. And he was asking me to give a presentation there because blockchain and real estate is also such a big thing. But what you mentioned before, that uh, it's a little bit hard to take care of your own possessions, your own wallets. And you mentioned account abstraction, which is now happening on the Ethereum blockchain. I also think it's a good exercise for people to realize that from one point in time on, they are responsible for their own assets and that nobody can really help them. Of course, if you invest a lot of money, you want to have some backup security, but uh, let's be honest, it's not that hard to have a seed phrase and to have it somewhere and to store it. And that helps with the understanding. But I had also students who set up an account and they didn't even bother to store the seed phrase. And later I told them, without the seed phrase, if you lose it, there's nobody who can help you. So that there is a mindset that needs to be changed in the first place. But of course, for mass market adoption, if we introduce, or if Ethereum, for example, comes now up with account abstraction, which makes it a little bit easier to recover your possessions, that will definitely help for the mass market. And that could be another driver. So there's so much going on. And as you've said, there's a huge opportunity. So I would also appeal to all students to have an eye on the technology and also to the industry people who are listening to this podcast. If you have time, explore the field. There's so much opportunity out there. And we can discuss some specific use cases if you like.
One metaphor which I started using recently, and I use these very extreme metaphors just because they make it clear, is like in Web2, we are kind of children and we can always call daddy for the password. If we lose our account, your password, we can call daddy, right? We can retrieve the password. But daddy can also take away everything from you. Because, you know, if you're a YouTuber and tomorrow something happens and YouTube shuts down your account, well, you gave too much control to them, right? Web3 is where you become enabled in the internet, because, well, then you have control of your stuff, you have responsibility, you have risks, but you are enabled, okay, or a citizen with rights. So it's definitely a step forward in general. And yeah, I agree with you. It's not that hard. That's what I used to say. It's not hard, but then it's also very easy to lose everything unless you're careful. And let's face it, people are not careful until they get burned. So yeah, unless we burn everybody, we need to do better wallets, basically. Yeah.
I like the metaphor that you used with Daddy. And for me, the biggest issue is that the transformation from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 2 Web 1 was very static, Web 2 was social media, was very visible. You know, all of a sudden you could interact with web pages like, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, you can do your own thing. And now we have the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. But for me, this is kind of invisible because, as I've mentioned in the beginning, I can make a transaction using cryptocurrencies, or I can make a transaction using PayPal. And for many people, it's the same thing. And the big difference is, in one case, you're doing it peer-to-peer, and in other case, you have a powerful intermediary, like you said, Daddy, and potentially Daddy can stop you. And that doesn't happen too often. So people don't realize how dependent they are on those big intermediaries. Now, I can tell you a short story, an experience from myself. I was a visiting professor at Purdue University in the United States, which is a very good job. And when I came there, I needed to set up a bank account. And in order to get a bank account, I needed a phone number. So I went to a shop to get a cell phone. And in order to get a cell phone, they wanted me to have a bank account. And so I was in a vicious cycle. And then I realized how dependent I am on those big institutions. You know, I finally could resolve this issue. I mean, full professor, associate professor at a good university, that helps. But I thought of all these people who are struggling much more than I do. And especially if you're poor, if you don't get a bank account, you're completely dependent. They can tell you if you're allowed to get a bank account or not. And this was also an eye-opener for me. And most people don't realize how powerful those intermediaries are unless something happens. And this is why the transition from Web 2 to Web 3 for me is kind of invisible.
It is definitely. And also I've been like pushing the narrative that you are like, I'm from the vacation rental industry. Airbnb is great, but Airbnb can shut down your account. But then, as you say, how often does it happen? Or if it happens, yeah, okay, it's because they did something wrong, which actually often is not even that, because you know, maybe they shut down an account because a guest told that the CO2 detector was actually a camera. This doesn't work. This doesn't work to convince people. What may work is the following, or at least that's what I'm using now. It's like, okay, Web2 is great. You can be a YouTuber, you can be an Instagrammer, you can be a TikToker, you can make money. And then ask yourself, how many people are actually making money on those platforms? Very few. And those platforms need a few examples to have everybody else work for free. Because you do all your YouTube videos and then you give up after a while because you're not making money. It's free content. And they gave you this, attractive, super, Mr. Beast YouTuber who makes a lot of money to push you toward doing free content for them, right? In Web3, you make money, for airdrops. I know people who made tens of thousands of dollars during the bull market in airdrops, which means you use protocols and they, instead of spending the money in advertisement, they give you tokens and you are kind of involved. Web3 pays you very quickly, very well, just to learn. Web2 makes you work for free, and if you are very, very lucky, you become a superstar. That's maybe a bit more efficient. I don't know what you think about that.
I fully agree with you. And I think there's also another effect that's very important. We are already logged in Web2 because it's so convenient to use these platforms. You mentioned Airbnb, Booking. I'm also using Booking frequently for my bookings because, first of all, I have my account. Then it's easy to find the content. It's connected to the maps, so I can see where a specific location is. I can see many customer reviews, and I'm lazy. I'm doing this because I know I get the same price most likely as on their website. So I'm using those big corporations because they also provide some service. I'm not saying that don't provide any service, but they're charging high fees for that. So I think if we now would reinvent the web starting from scratch, then of course it would be more decentralized and we could skip the Web 2 part, but we already have these huge incumbents and they have our data and they have lots of information and we're kind of lazy and locked in. So we are using what we are used to. And this is why it's so hard for the new companies coming up, convincing the end users that it would be an advantage to use their services.
That can bring us to the question why the travel industry is so slow in adopting that. And let me give you my perspective on that. I also use Booking.com and a bit more rarely Airbnb. Even if I try to use alternatives, the fact is nothing gets even close to what they're doing. They are very, very good, and we should be grateful because they give us a service which did not exist before. So as per today, rather than trying to convince people to leave those platforms, let's build something better. And we haven't done this yet. Now we start seeing potential improvements. I won't go into detail right now, but today, as it is today, I am stuck in Booking.com. I don't have alternatives. I tried even, other companies, especially even Web3 companies who are kind of giving alternatives. It's not comparable yet, even if I make the effort. So we need on our side to actually build something which is better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you specifically about my first contact with tourism and blockchain. It was back in 2017 or early 2018. And I met somebody who told me about Winding Tree. And the interesting thing is she was not some kind of computer nerd or somebody interested specifically in blockchain. She was a hotel owner. And she was kind of furious about the fees she had to pay to those intermediaries. And might have been early 2018, so right at the beginning of Winding Tree, she told me that she's really looking forward for those platforms to come because she cannot afford any longer to pay those high fees, and she's looking forward to disintermediation. That was 5 years ago, and we're still not there yet. But I know there is a market out there for those decentralized platforms because for two reasons, and you already mentioned them. First of all, it's cheaper for the hotels, and many of them living on a small margin. And the second one is that they are giving up so much power by using those intermediaries. So I know there are many people out there, but in the years to follow, I was even part of a young startup. It must have been around 2018 or 19, something like that, which was doing exactly that. And you had Treiblmaier in the last episode, or in one of the last episodes, and you also had Max from Winding Tree. So all of them had the same purpose, and we could clearly see a business model. But then we were applying for funding, and I remember the situation when we are doing our pitch. It was at 4 in the afternoon. Everybody in the jury was already very, very tired. A lady was playing with a cell phone, and in the end, we got rejected from funding because blockchain uses too much energy. So nobody really listened to what we are talking to. And then, of course, there was the blockchain winter. And in a way, maybe the tourism industry lost the opportunity to update their knowledge, as many of them did, because there was enough time for doing so. Because it's a very busy industry, and if you're a manager, you know, there's not much time if you're running a hotel or something like that. But the opportunity is still around, and there needs to be awareness. I know that there are many people in the tourism and hotel industry who would look for the solutions, but they don't have time to check this out, or they're even not aware that those solutions potentially exist for them.
Oh, well, since you mentioned already a couple of times the energy issue, maybe we can clarify this. Does blockchain use too much energy today?
Okay. That's a good one. Actually, I've just written a paper on that. As an academic, I write papers, and it turned out to be my longest paper ever. It has about 30,000 words, which is will be 40 or 60 pages when it's 40, 50, 60 pages when it's going to be published. By the way, all the papers I'm mentioning in this podcast are either available for free, or if somebody's interested in them, please send me an email. I would be happy to give it to you, because I have my job as a university. I'm professor. I'm not making any money of that. So I finally wanted to settle this issue for good. So that's why I've written that paper. Hopefully it's going to be published in a couple of months. That's a very, very complicated subject. And I'm mostly referring to Bitcoin and energy consumption, because the reason why Bitcoin is using so much energy is because it's using some kind of procedure called the proof of work algorithm. Then it's part of the Nakamoto consensus to create consensus in the network to agree on who is allowed to produce the next block. But this is very unique to Bitcoin, and other blockchains do not use that much energy. And for example, Ethereum just made a transition last year from using a proof of work that uses a lot of energy to create consensus to a so-called proof of stake, where you stake your tokens or coins in order to be able to make the decision. So I'm always asking my students, which one is better, proof of work or proof of stake, where Ethereum saves 99.998% or something like that of the energy? And most likely they say, oh, Ethereum made a huge leap forward, and that's what you see in the social media. But you need to take into account that now it's different. It's conceptually different. And one might argue that proof of stake is not as democratic as proof of work is. So it's a very complicated subject, but mostly when we are talking about blockchains in the tourism industry, we are talking about private and permission solutions, and they do not use that much energy. So when we're talking about, I think you had Chain for Travel with the Camino blockchain in your podcast before, they're using, I think, proof of stake, proof of authority, and energy is not an issue there. And this is very important. So blockchain is not connected with a lot of energy use. Some blockchains are, especially Bitcoin, but other not. And so we need to abstract from that.
Yeah. Let me tell me my perspective on this. I fully agree. First of all, let's clarify even further. Only Bitcoin basically uses a lot of energy, and on Bitcoin, nothing is being built. There's no Web3 travel on Bitcoin. All the rest are not using a lot of energy, no more than your Google or Booking service, right? Actually, probably much less. So first of all the blockchains used in Web3 are not wasting energy. Just Bitcoin does. You go back to Bitcoin, does it waste energy? The way I like to put it is like, if Bitcoin was consuming one lamp, one bulb per year, so 1 kilowatt per year, it will still be considered wasting energy. Why? Because people think it's useless. People don't understand, or they don't agree with the fact that Bitcoin is actually useful. So if something is completely useful, by default, the energy consumed is wasted. So we can try to explain that Bitcoin actually uses less, or now it's going green, is using flare gases. if people think that Bitcoin is useless, it's a waste. So we're not going to convince anyone with that. On the other end, about proof of work, Bitcoin, proof of stake, Ethereum, and others, which one is better? I agree with you. We don't know. It depends. First of all, proof of work has proven for over 10 years that it works. It's not been attacked. The Bitcoin network has never been attacked. I mean, sorry, it's been attacked every minute. It's never been broken, right? Proof of stake, well, we'll have to see. I hope it works, but it hasn't really proved such a long time yet. And the dynamics of proof of work are of a certain kind. Is it centralizing? Yeah, maybe, because mining is more centralized. You need, big factories. Is proof of stake really more decentralized because all you need is a computer, and today is what, at least 16 ETH, because it's 32 ETH, which is like $40,000-$50,000. You can use less because you can use like Rocket Pool. Is this, I mean, who has $30,000 to put on a machine where you may lose them? Is this democratic? Maybe not. Is it going to be more concentrated, or is it going to be less? We don't know. So the jury is out. I think we honestly cannot say what is better and what is worse, especially because it depends on the use case.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. And again, I cannot simply wrap up my paper that has nearly 30,000 words, but I'm not taking a position in favor or against Bitcoin, just listing a lot of arguments, and I try to be impartial and adding my 2 cents also, of course. But as you mentioned before, there are many people out there who hate Bitcoin, and they're just using the same arguments over and over again. For example, Bitcoin uses too much energy, or Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, which I debunked in another paper. And they're just doing this to convince the general public not to think about Bitcoin at all. But again, for all those listening who are concerned about the environment, like you mentioned before, Luca, we are discussing solutions here for the tourism industry that do not consume that much energy. That should not be an argument in the first place. That's very important to make this clear.
Okay, so again, just to wrap this part up, so why is the travel industry so slow in picking up this technology?
Actually, it's not only the travel industry. It's kind of interesting when I talk to people. So let's say last week I had an interview with somebody from the aviation industry, and he said exactly the same thing about the aviation industry. So it always depends on how keen you are to keep your data to yourself, for example, how unwilling you are not to share any company secrets or things like that. That might be one factor, that they are afraid of coming up with a business model that might be called co-opetition, which is a combination of cooperation and competition. So you're working together with those companies, which at the same time you're competing with. That could be an issue. Another issue could be what we already mentioned before, that it's still very hard to wrap your head around the technology. It's still very hard to understand how it works and what could be done. And this comes together with all this negative publicity that the technology is getting, because there are still very powerful incumbents. That could be the third reason, that those who are already in power, they want to create more and more lock-in effects to make sure that people in the industry are not exploring different options. So I think those are the three main reasons that I could see. And once more, I think there is a kind of a lost opportunity during the COVID lockdown for many working in this industry to explore Web3, or before that was blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and how it could be useful for them. But I can also see some movement. It's not the case that all is lost, nothing is happening. There are still those who are the front runners of the industry, and I would assume that those are the ones that will benefit a lot in the future.
Well, one thing which I tell myself is, like, when you see incumbents spending so much time and energy against a new technology, it certainly proves that the new technology is impactful. Because if it wasn't, they would simply ignore it. So the more they tell me that's bad, it's got bad, and uses energy or whatever, and these arguments are not really scientific, the more it tells me, okay, they understand this is going to change things. This is not going to change things in their favor. Who is going to change things in favor of, sorry for the English here, And probably if Web2 is the web of corporations, probably it's not very good for corporations. So maybe it's good for people. Yeah, probably yes. So how do you say when you talk to people, why is blockchain in tourism important in the first place?
Yeah, I just want to refer to a report of mine, which I authored last year. It's called Blockchain Transformation in the Tourism and Hospitality Sector, which I published for the Blockchain Research Institute. You can download it for free. And of course, it's not fully up to date because I wrote it 1.5 years ago. And in this report, I list a lot of different use cases for the industry. And I guess you mentioned most of those already in your podcast. So if somebody explores your podcast from episode 1 onward, then you have all these ideas. And the confusing things, I guess, for many people is how many use cases you can build, let's say, based on blockchain technology, because we have a couple of core properties. Let's say disintermediation, traceability, proof of, I don't know, proof of immutability or immutability, things like that. It's only a handful of properties. And out of these properties, there come so many use cases that it might be confusing for people. So I would say the most convincing argument might be transaction costs. So it makes it cheaper for end users potentially, and also for companies to do their business. And the second big argument, like we've discussed before, is the reduction of power. And I think one important thing here is that we are always looking at the big game changers. So we are talking about completely disintermediating the industry. That would be a total huge impact. It's like making a Bitcoin the world currency. But under the hood, there is a lot going on, which I find totally interesting. So in my report, for example, I mentioned the DMC, the DMO, Destination Management Organization Heideland in Switzerland. And they're using blockchain technology to automatically transfer those tourism fees. So it makes administrative tasks a lot easier. And this is some kind of task that's not spectacular. And most likely you don't find it in news. Companies are just saving a little bit of paperwork, but this is fully operational. And the thing is, those use cases are not often discussed because, they're not spectacular, but they make lives easier. And maybe that's a starting point for many organizations to first get a glimpse of what blockchain can do for them, and to start kind of bottom up, doing little things, changing business processes with blockchain, and then they might end up doing the big things, because then they can see how useful the technology is. But to wrap it all up, for businesses and for the end consumers, I see the two big drivers, which is saving money and being independent.
Okay, and do people, like, how do they get this kind of message in general when you talk to them about that? Does it work? Do they have follow-up questions? Do they kind of?
There's always a lot of interest, but it fully depends. Last year I gave a presentation to some top-level managers of a supply chain supply chain company, a big one. And I was surprised to see that they have not had any experience with blockchain yet. They didn't even know what it was. So for me, it's also very slow what's going on. And the reaction usually is very positive. But I can also see a lot of, I wouldn't call it resistance, but simply lack of time. And I think many companies, they just need to experience what others are doing first. They want to be the first movers. To give you one example, which is from the travel industry, the Mark Schultz, who has a very interesting podcast on blockchain and aviation. I was in one of those episodes. He made 24 episodes, only blockchain in aviation, because some people might think, one episode might be enough. No, there's a lot to discover. And he created NFTs. I think they're called Aviator Peeps, for a community in aviation. So if you buy one of those NFTs, you get some kind of special utility, and you get some services. And I think it's initiatives like that, if they take off over time, then other companies will see that, they will watch, they will understand, and over time there will be more awareness how we can use these technologies to really generate revenue, because in the end it's all about making your business more profitable.
Do you think this is going to be, provided that actually Web3 travel is going to be a thing in the future? Do you see this as a linear growth or more like the exponential growth, like the one day you wake up and everything has changed?
Honestly, I'm not very good in making predictions. Basically, that's not true, because I'm always one who's saying we have to wait and see. Because I remember, let's say back in 2017, then I went to a blockchain presentation. There was always one guy from the audience yelling, "Oh, you will see quantum computing is going to break it all." And my attitude is more, let's wait and see, because of course there's quantum secure cryptography. It's so hard to say what exactly is going to happen. We could have something like, I don't know, a Facebook moment where everybody hopping on one platform, and then we have those economies of scale that could happen. But I cannot really make a prediction here. But what I'm pretty sure that there will be growth, and under the hood, those applications, like I mentioned before, the Heideland, where you have an automatic transfer of the travel fees, they will grow, and others will see what's going to happen. So it could be exponential at one point in time, but at the moment it looks more like a slow linear growth.
Well, we just had this exponential thing in AI, right? It started with images, and then it went, when ChatGPT came out, and AI went through the same thing. Very slow growth, excitement, long winters, up and down, without the speculation, because you can't speculate. The speculation in crypto makes it more extreme, right? And then one day, they launched this one product, actually a beta product, and everybody went kind of crazy. And now we have all, it's really gone exponential, and we using this more and more. But before we were using AI already, Google Maps or even the algorithms. So it could go this way, that one day we have all the pieces together, and somebody comes out with one easy to use app which changes travel forever. Or maybe not. Maybe it's gonna be more like the water going on the terrain and making everything wet and changing the terrain under us. Probably a mix of both, yeah. But yeah, we can make predictions. But I'm starting to, physically getting ready for the impact, because after at the beginning, 2013, when I got into Bitcoin, of course, it was an experiment. 2017 was the moment where, yeah, it's gonna change everything in a year, and then it didn't. And then we went into this like long, slow, linear growth. But now I start to look ahead and say, maybe we're gonna, something is gonna lift us up very, very quickly and violently, and we should be ready for that. I'm kind of not even, would you say, well, it happens like behind my mind, right? It's like I realize that I'm preparing for impact, and I may be wrong, but I see so many things getting together. And the latest, strong push toward better wallets, which is like account abstraction, etc., but better wallets, maybe what changes everything. Or the other thing is like hybrid things where most people don't need to interact with the wallet. Yes, they're not sovereign. Yes, they give control to the company, but they can actually interact with this ecosystem easily. So things are happening. I don't know. We don't know. You're right not to make predictions, but I find myself that I'm preparing for impact. It doesn't mean next month. It could be in 2 years to 3 years, but I see a lot of things happening at the same time. So
yeah, maybe one reason for the slow growth is also that by its very nature, blockchain and everything that's associated to it is decentralized, distributed, which means there's not one powerful organization that's promoting it. Because in many of the other applications, you have a huge company, and then you have a marketing budget, and you can push your product. And that could be one reason. So it's distributed, who is going to promote it? And another reason, as I've mentioned before, could be that there's a lot of resistance to overcome. There's a lot of interest of incumbents that this is not going to happen. And so they're doing the best to coming up with alternative models or to distract you and things like that. those could be reasons.
There's also the fact that there's money in crypto, of course. There's been a lot of investment, but then the optimization was not for the product or product market fit. Optimization often is like, let's make this token pump. So you got the VCs putting money into it, and then finally they don't need to wait for an exit 10 years or 5 years later. They can just pump a token. They bought it for 1, they sell it for 10. So you have all these projects which communicate in a way that looks like they're going to change everything, and all they're going to change is the price of the token so that the VCs can get out, right? And this is not helping, definitely. This is really toxic for the industry, but it's also a result of not allowing ICOs, in my opinion. Like ICOs were like the Far West, but then they rein them in. Only VCs, VCs or accredited investors can invest into this stuff. And we are back to square one, where some people would make a lot of money and the rest we just pay for them. So that could be also the reason. What is in your opinion, the role of academia to speed up adoption? Like, can academia help on this?
I hope so. I mean, that's our task in a way. That's how I see it. And first of all, we need to educate. And of course, the nice thing is we're educating the next generation. As I've mentioned before, Modul University Vienna, it's basically 50% a tourism university. Now we have also 50% management and also data science students by now. But we need to educate the next generation what the technology can do for them and how it works and what the risks are and what the benefits are. And then they're going out to the industry, and many of them come from a background in tourism. Then they can educate the parents or the managers of the companies they're working in. Of course, it takes some time, but first of all, we need this education. And once more, there is a second stream. For example, I'm now being asked frequently to give keynote speeches, or I'm doing industry projects. So there's no intermediary like the students here. I'm directly reaching out to the industry, and they are developing the product, so I can advise them what they could potentially do. And of course, every once in a while, I'm also contacted by somebody from the media to give an interview. And all of those are things that we in academia can do because we also have some kind of credibility, because I'm not involved in one specific company and one specific project, so I can be independent. I can tell them what I think is a huge potential, but I can also tell them what I think are risks. And this is where academia comes in, and that's why it's so important that many academics learn about these new technologies and communicate them to the industry and to the general public.
Well, I can tell you for sure that many students are writing theses about that. I think I talked to at least 5 different students who were writing a thesis on Web3 for blockchain in trouble. So I'm sure there's many. So if it doesn't come from the professors, it will come from the students, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of research there.
I think I've supervised more than 20 already. The problem is just that many of them want to do a topic that's very big. Let's say the impact of blockchain on the financial industry. And I always tell them that's too big. You need to focus on something specific. And the first student who I supervised with a blockchain topic, I think that was in 2017 or 18, he went out to do some interviews for his thesis, and they immediately offered him a job because he mentioned the term blockchain. Of course, that was the hype phase, and then we had blockchain winter. It was not en vogue anymore, and now it's a little bit more consolidated. So you won't get a job just because saying blockchain, but if you really know about the subject matter, it will help you quite a bit.
I think you're going to lose a job if you mention blockchain.
that was the crypto winter, yeah.
Yeah, in crypto winter, like NFTs before, or like you speak NFT and somebody appears in front of you and offers you a job. If you say NFT now, they're gonna fire you. So it's really extreme.
Yeah, because they don't get it. You know, yeah. I did my own NFTs. I have to briefly mention that because I wanted to show my students how NFTs work. So I said I'm going to do some NFTs. But the thing is, you always need to pay some transaction fees to do this and to buy them. So I thought I'm going to do something useful. And I got in contact with a children's hospital here in Austria. I created some NFTs for them, and they're still out there on OpenSea. You can buy them, and all the money goes to the hospital. So the university or me don't get any money. And from a technical perspective, it was a huge success. And again, it's all still out there, and I created a video on how to buy them. But from an adoption perspective, it was very, very slow, and you can see hardly anyone bought them. So business perspective, poor, but technical perspective, great. And I still think it's a huge success because I can think of a couple of reasons. Big advantages that you have using NFTs as opposed to making direct donations. You can create a community around them. You can trade and sell them. You can allow people to access some content and all those kind of things. And later on, you can add additional services. So NFTs are a great way for fundraising. And many people listening now might say, wait a second, now he's talking about donations. And this is a tourism podcast. But for me, it's very important that it does not really matter what's behind an NFT. It could be a donation, but it could be a hotel room. You can use it for booking. And you had this in your show. So the thing is, you can use NFTs for anything of value, which basically means anything. The only thing that I think is not that useful if you just tokenize the first Twitter tweet like Jack Dorsey did and sell it for 2.9 million. And then of course the price plummeted. There's no real use case. It's a gag, it's a gimmick. But if you think about it in more detail, then you will find many use cases, especially in the tourism industry. Create some loyalty programs using NFTs. It's being done. Tokenize hotel rooms, and for the event industry, tokenize tickets. And it's so obvious, and I see so many advantages. We just need to wait, and we need to educate, or I need to educate the students about these opportunities.
I'm smiling as you speak because, as you may know, I launched an NFT for this podcast, and it was I really enjoyed a lot coding it because I'm a bad coder, but then I can code a little bit, and it's like I have this creative joy doing that. And this NFT has you can sponsor the event, and so I'm gonna mention the company, right? Or you can simply pay a little bit as a donation. I think it's like $6-7. It didn't work so far. I had one person buying the the donation, and this is the same person who wrote the code from where I forked from. So, and I wonder why. Well, I think, to be honest, it's too many steps. It's like, even if you listen to this podcast and you appreciate it and you've been educated, right? People still don't buy it because you have to go there, connect your wallet, and pay a little bit, and it's not like one button, right? So far it's been not successful, but I don't think it's an education problem or attention. It's like it's annoying to do stuff online with NFTs unless you have this strong motivation, which is speculation. If you think it's going to go up 10-100 times, then you're going to put the work into this. And so non-speculative NFTs are still using a technology which is complicated for most people. Even if you have a wallet, it's even for me, minting an NFT for a donation, I still have to connect my wallet, especially if I use a hardware wallet, and connect to a smart contract, which may, I have to trust it. And yeah, so we have to make it easier. So I think the issue is mostly there. And that also answers the question, in my opinion, why adoption is low. It's still complicated. It's still objectively complicated, especially if you don't have a wallet.
Yeah, and I can tell you the reason why you don't have a second donator. Actually, I wanted to make a donation.
Oh my God!
For your show. Yes.
Yeah.
No, there's no bug.
No?
There's a bug in the system. I can tell you. So I figured out I'm using MetaMask, and I didn't have enough Ether because I used it for other purposes.
Right.
And you're using the Arbitrum second layer, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yes.
So.
Yes.
No, it's not a problem. Yeah, it's a additional complexity. Right. So I went to the website, the ramp that you suggested, and then I filled out all the form. And the stumbling block is actually my bank in Austria, because they needed to confirm the transaction, and I don't think it has happened yet. Oh. So I am having issues getting new money, fiat money, euro in this case, from my bank to MetaMask, on Ethereum blockchain, so that I can later on use the ramp to Arbitrum. It's complicated, but I know how to do it. But my bank actually has not given me the authorization yet to do this. And of course, I can figure out other ways, but I didn't have time for doing that. But
Yeah.
just to tell you my experience, so it's possible I can do it. I can always find a way, let's say using another exchange, but I'm still waiting for the confirmation of my bank.
Thank you for wanting to donate, of course, and thank you for this feedback. Yeah, choosing a second layer on Ethereum is already like hiding it away, and you have to get there with your money. I'm wondering what happens if I kind of make the donation with credit card, and you just pay the credit card, and I do it manually for you. I think that would be open a lot this, and I'm waiting to do that because I want to kind of wait to see if something happens on chain first. I have this. I think the problem is there. There's an easy way to get paid is like putting a stripe and let people with a credit card, rather than giving all these steps. Of course, that then involves back all those banks, basically, right? We don't want that, but so far, because most people don't have ready money on crypto. This is a big problem for sure. Then this is the liquidity problem. Is it like there's only $1 trillion in the total of crypto, which means that every person has very little in it, and there's so many chains, and you have to jump from one to the other. It's a technical problem still. Yes.
Definitely. And I have the same issue with my NFTs for the Children's Hospital, because I was also using a second layer, namely Polygon. Because for those listeners who are not familiar with those issues, you have to pay fees on the main chain, which is Ethereum. But if you take one step further and you go to another layer, in my case, it's called Polygon. In the case of Luca, it's Arbitrum. Then the transaction fees are very small, and you can, as long as you stay on that layer, basically, you don't have any transaction fees. But it's not that easy to have another layer of complexity in between, moving from the Ethereum blockchain to the second layer, which could be Polygon or could be Arbitrum. And that's why I created an instructional video for my students on how to do this. And I think this added complexity is a stumbling block for many not to do it. And again, in your specific case, I'm still waiting for my bank, who needs to approve the transaction for some reason if I'm using the ramp. So we have these issues, but they can be solved. And the moment you have a lot of sufficient money on one of those blockchains, on one of those layers, you can basically move in the space as you like. And then it's very easy. You just click a button.
Let me reiterate something I probably said in the podcast before. That stumbling block, so that thing which makes it hard to go on the other side, is your opportunity. And I'm talking to the students here. If everything is easy, everything is there, everybody's there, there's no opportunity anymore. So the moment that stumbling block goes away, your opportunity goes away. Let me give you an example. 20 years ago, when I was traveling around Australia and Asia, and it was like the year 2000, and I wanted to make something online because I didn't want to go back to my office. I wanted to travel full time. And I had this idea to create an apartment booking platform. And how do you do that? Well, you have to know how to do a website. And doing a website was really hard at the time. There was no, WordPress or Shopify or whatever. You had to do coding with HTML, which then turns out it's not coding, it's pretty simple. It took me 10, 20 hours to learn these things. And I'm not a programmer, right? I just had the incentive to learn. So I was able to do very basic websites, very basic, like pictures and text. And that allowed me then to go to Prague and get apartments and put them online and be first in Google and get bookings and leave my job. I had left my job before, so don't go back to my job and travel full time all over the world for 10 years. Okay. Why? Because there was a stumbling block. When WordPress came on the market and when other systems came on the market, it was too late. Everybody was doing websites. So crypto today still has these difficulties, which look like mountains. They are just little hills. Go on the other side of the hill, you're leaving 99% of the other people behind you, and you're going to be in the land of opportunities. So again, that stumbling block, it's going to go away. Move before it's too late. That's my suggestion.
Actually, I agree with you 100%, and that's exactly what I'm telling my students. And I've seen it in the past, when I was a member of the Google Academic Challenge for search engine optimization from the very beginning on. And in the first years, I was teaching this to my students. They got some kind of advantage in the industry. Like you said, if you're one of the few back in 1999 who knew how to create a website, you had an advantage. That advantage goes away. The same thing in the Google Online Marketing Challenge. After 1, 2, 3 years, it was more like common knowledge. And now we have this, for example, NFT thing. And I was surprised how easy it is to create NFTs, but it's still not trivial, but it's not that hard to do. And if any students are still listening to this podcast, or anyone from the industry, it's doable. And you can create your NFTs, and it might be relatively easy for you to find an opportunity to use them inside your company. Either you tokenize your inventory or you create a loyalty program, and there's still this huge opportunity. And like you said, Luca, it will go away. In a couple of years, you have all these specialized companies, or maybe it's so easy to do that it's not really a USP anymore for you. But at the moment, in the year 2023, it still is. So I would encourage everybody to check out the opportunities we're having here.
Yeah, and also what you mentioned is important. You don't have to do the very hard things. So there are things which are really hard. You need to study a year, 2, 3, 5 to do them. And then there are very easy things. It's in the middle. It's those things which look hard to most people, but they are actually pretty easy. So learning to mint an NFT, even with the code, right? Even if you're not a coder, it's a question of hours, maybe days, maybe weeks, according to how much you know, how fast you learn. It's not a question of getting a degree, right? So let's say it takes you a month of full-time study to learn doing NFT. That month will put you ahead of most people, right? So very, very well spent month. And so it's those things which look like mountains, but they're actually little hills or little bumps on the road. This is the secret for in the era of exponential growth in everything, right? So yeah.
I think we already covered the most important things. The way I see that this episode is also a little bit of a wrap up and an outlook in the future. And I could imagine that if somebody is jumping in and the first episode they are hearing is this one, I would encourage them to go back to all of your previous episodes. And it's not something that you can do on a weekend by listening to all episodes, 40, 50, 60 hours. It's something that needs to sink in. And as you've said before, we are still very early in the space, which is exciting for me, but it's also a little bit frustrating to see how slow things are going. But it's this great opportunity for students, for managers, and the industry as a whole.
Okay, great. So that was great. Let me just finish by reminding everyone that we have a conference on the 15th of May in Barcelona. This is called Web3 in Travel Conference, and we're gonna have startups and people talking about exactly this kind of industry. And yeah, you can buy with a credit card, or if you're more courageous, you can buy on Polygon as your NFT through an NFT. And yeah, it's the same kind of thing. If you have already the tokens, you can do it. Otherwise, it's a bit longer, but you get a better price. Let's see how this works. You get a better price on the NFT. And what we added is that if you own one NFT we built a couple of years ago, which is called Little Traveler, basically a picture, right? If you own that one, which costs about $60, you get half price on the ticket. And this is done completely automatically. So that the contract sees that you own that NFT in the same address you're paying from, and it gives you a 50% discount. So to go back to what we were saying, Horst, is like NFTs are also giving these incredible automation features, which are really, really exciting. We've been playing with them, and it's a lot of fun. We just now need them to be easier for people, and I'm sure NFTs are gonna be used in many use cases, right?
Exactly, Luca. And I've seen that you're going to organize this conference as a DAO, as a decentralized autonomous organization, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen anyone doing this before. Is this your idea, or did you get it from someone?
Well, it's my idea, but one thing which has to be said, doing things in a decentralized manner is harder than doing them in a centralized manner. So it's easier to organize a conference as like one company who, tries to organize it and maybe make some profit, rather than make a DAO, which is like an association of people, and in our case, wants to be an association of travel industry professionals, so that these conference doesn't belong to one company, but belongs to the whole industry. So anybody from the industry can own the conference and own the infrastructure we're building to organize more conferences in the future. To explain to people who don't know what it is, basically, the money about the conference is managed in a treasury, more precisely a safe, which is managed by people who are part of the DAO. So when you buy a ticket, the money goes into this safe, but I personally cannot move the money myself. We need to be in consensus of a majority, a certain number of people who have the keys to this treasury. So once we do this successfully in Barcelona and somebody says, I want to organize another one, they can use the same infrastructure. They can say, okay, who wants to be part of the next one? And we have a distributed infrastructure. It's like a company or like an association or cooperative, which belongs to everybody who's part of it. I think this is much more, is less efficient in the short term, but is more resilient and more scalable in the long term. We can organize a lot of conferences based on that. And, when a company organizes a conference, they try to make their own interest. They know who to call. For instance, we decide who to call collectively. They try to make a profit. The conference is not trying to make a profit here, mostly. And so it's a different thing. Experimental, probably we're going to make a lot of mistakes. Probably we're going to change it in the future. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Mostly because it's fun, to be honest. It's a new thing. It's fun. Yeah, you can have fun playing video games, but it's fun. And it's like we are maybe building a new paradigm for conferences. So it's very, very exciting from this point of view.
It is. And as I've mentioned before, I've never seen anyone doing it like that. So when I came on your website, I said, holy moly, that's an interesting idea. I've never thought about it. And event management is also a big part of the whole tourism travel industry. And I think you just invented a new business idea. And it might not work in all occasions. Like I say, sometimes you need to have an incumbent with a lot of experience in the field, but it might be the ideal solution for some occasions where you have a community, but not one member that is strong enough to finance it, everything. So might be a very interesting business model for the future for many organizations working in the space to explore. It's a brilliant idea, Luca.
There's the energy perspective. Is like if I do this as a company, there's all my energy and the energy of people working for me, and then the other people are kind of coming to speak, whatever, but they not put too much of their energy. Done as a DAO, anybody is really free to put all the energy they want because they're working for themselves too, right? And it's the same thing happening in democracies compared to dictatorships. In democracies, when we are in a democracy, we feel that we are working for ourselves. Yeah, we are part of something bigger, but all the effort I put, it is kind of coming back to me. While in a dictatorship, I just follow orders because I want to survive, which is kind of what you do in a company, right? You follow orders because you need your salary. So you don't put all of your heart and soul into this. DAOs are hopefully able to harness more of people's energy, especially the best part of energy, which is like the ideas, right? Things you think about under the shower because they excite you. So I'm trying to make something which is kind of putting people together in a more efficient way, even if it's not efficient at first sight. So let's say it's at least it's interesting, and we're learning a lot of things with that.
Definitely, then I think it could work. So maybe sometime in the future you want to make it to Vienna and we can make a DAO, and the next Web3 conference might be at Modul University Vienna.
All right, okay. It's getting easier and easier, because the tools are getting better and better. So we started with DAOs a few years ago, and now it's much, much easier. and in the future it's going to be very, very easy. So yeah, let's talk about this. Maybe after Barcelona, Vienna would be nice.
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Cool. Horst, it was great having you here. Thank you again to Maxim for making the introduction. And yeah, hopefully we're going to meet in real life soon too.
I hope so too, Luca. Thank you very much for having me. It was a great conversation with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And we're done. Thank you for listening to this episode. For more insights, follow me on Twitter at Tripluca, TRIPLUCA. If you enjoy my podcast and want to support it, head on to podcast.web3intravel.com, 3 is a digit, and mint an NFT. If you want to sponsor it, you can do it at the same page. I will mention you in the podcast, and your name will appear on all donation NFTs for a while. Thank you, and ciao.